As above, so below. So below, as above. In this video, I'm going to be telling you how everything in the universe is interconnected. Welcome back to the Ether Lab, the School of the Seekers and your home for real magic and real alchemy. So in this video, I'm going to show you how the universe reflects itself all throughout, and I'm going to show you through the example of the plants, the planets, and the gods. When we hear the expression as above, so below, and as below, so above, this is an ancient teaching distilled into a single sentence. It's meant for you to ponder, it's meant for you to understand that it's true. And if you look for the proof, you'll find it. And I'll use this example of the plants, the planets, and the gods to explain that proof to you now. First of all, it's really important that you understand that the stories of the gods reflect the nature of the planets. And if you look over the world at all the different ancient systems of pagan gods, you'll see there is an incredible amount of synchronicity, an incredible amount of people from Japan and China and India and Europe and Africa, all having very similar stories about very similar deities and gods and goddesses, without seeming to have this really solid connection, but somehow they all manage to repeat the stories again and again. And the reason for this is because the gods are a reflection of man. They're a reflection of our personality traits and our natures. And the way that they created these stories of the gods was through the planets. So let's start with the obvious one. Think of the sun. Try and imagine what sort of personality the sun might have if it was a more human-like character. To me, it makes perfect sense when you hear about the stories of the gods in relation to the sun and how they were most often described as being the life giver and this precious jewel that the sun is, because without the sun we wouldn't have light and warmth and heat in our solar system. Now let's move on to the moon. That's quite obvious too. Very bright, a lot like the sun, not as bright as the sun, a lot more mysterious. And when you're out at night and the moon is bright and it's still and it's quiet, there's this mysterious silence about the air. Then let's have a look at Mercury. When you have a look at Mercury and you see that it's the hottest planet, it's the closest to the sun, it's obvious as to why the gods associated with Mercury, like Mercury in the Roman gods, like Hermes in the Greek gods, Thoth in the Egyptian gods, also Hermes, or Odin in the Viking gods. Just some examples, but they're all based around Mercury. The color that reflects them is blue, the throat chakra. Okay, so they are closest to the sun and considered in every case to be the keeper of knowledge, considered to be the scribe of God, the one that would get the messages from God and pass them on. And it makes sense when you see that Mercury is the closest to the sun. Now let's have a look at Venus, the next planet along. This also very warm and small planet has been given the symbol in alchemy and in mainstream society of the female symbol. And vice versa, you've got Mars with the male symbol. Well, Venus is the epitome of feminine energy, whereas Mars is the epitome of masculine energy. And when you learn the stories about the gods associated with Venus and Mars, so with Venus, we've got Venus from Rome, we've got Isis from the ancient Egyptian, we've got Freya or Frida from the Scandinavian mythologies and also moving over into Old English mythologies. And if you hear the stories about Venus and all her different representations, she's all about sensuality. She's all about pleasure. She's all about relaxation and surrendering into the water. When I think of Venus, I imagine her bathing in a stream with her sisters, being one with the water, being one with their emotions, being really connected to themselves and each other. Now let's look at Mars and all of his equivalents. Mars for the ancient Roman, Ares for ancient Greece, Montu in ancient Egyptian, and Tia or Tu in ancient Scandinavian and Old English mythology. And they were all the god of war. They're all associated with Mars and they all have the same sorts of stories to tell. Next up, we've got Jupiter, this big orange gas giant. And that has been associated with Zeus from the Greek, Jupiter obviously from the Roman, Thor from the Scandinavian, and all of their stories are about being this creative force. Thor, the lightning in the sky that Thor created in ancient Scandinavian mythology, is because he's banging his hammer on the anvil making a sword. It wasn't because he was banging his hammer on, whoever the Avengers were fighting that day. He was a god of war, but more than that, he was the blacksmith. He was the one creating. And he is associated with lightning, as was Zeus. Zeus was a creator god, as was Jove, Jupiter's other name in ancient Roman, Jove. They were all associated with lightning and having this sort of creative, kind of sexual aspect of masculine creativity. And the reason that I say it's more of a masculine creativity is because in alchemy, there are the two major forces of the universe, electricity and magnetism, hence the electromagnetic fields that things create. Everything creates an electromagnetic field because it has a certain degree of magnetism and a certain degree of electricity. It's the alchemical belief that the electricity is the masculine aspect and the magnetism is the feminine aspect. Hence why women attract men more than the other way around. More often, men have the sort of dynamic moving nature about them and women have more of the drawing nature to them. Now, that's not to say we can't flip it. There are men that definitely attract and magnetize people, and there are women that are very definitely dynamic and take the lead, as it were. But in a base sense of what the actual energies are, I'm not talking about a human man and a human woman. I'm talking about energetic masculinity, energetic feminism. The sun is considered masculine and the earth considered feminine. And that makes sense because we live on the earth and the earth holds us to her. And we're magnetized to the earth, and yet the sun feeds us with electric light, with electrified waves that feed the planet. And if we look at it this way, isn't the earth a lot like an egg that the sun impregnates with life? The earth is the feminine and it holds all the ingredients, and the sun is that vital force that kicks it all off and gets it all going. So you can start to see that understanding masculine and feminine energy from a totally non-human perspective, you start to see the energies and how they work together. So we saw Zeus and Jupiter and Jove and Thor as this creative masculine type. Now next up in the line is Saturn. And Saturn is similar but different, similar but opposite to Jupiter and Zeus, because Saturn has been associated with the Grim Reaper. In the Greek, it was Kronos. And although he was male in that representation, if you understand what Saturn is responsible for, you can see how it fits together. Basically, Zeus's energy was very dynamic and forward-moving and, grandiose and like literally Thor in the sky forging the weapons of the gods over the sky of the earth. The thing about Saturn is you can imagine the rings around Saturn. Those rings are meant to represent our restrictions or our limitations. The reason that is more feminine is because it brings it back to earth. Zeus's energy was up in the heavens and up in the sky and really crazy and full on, whereas Kronos and Saturn taught us about agriculture, about wealth, about commerce, about our limitations. And if you know much about astrology, you'll know what people say about their Saturn return. And your Saturn return is a beautiful thing, because what often happens to people is as they're growing up, they're crazy. Like I know I have been, and I know many people have been. Leading up to my Saturn return, I was absolutely mental and I was always trying to do all these very Zeus-like activities and create all these big things. It was making me go nuts. When Saturn came back in to make me more realistic and bring my desires and my abilities and my potentials and my goals back to earth, back to something real and put some limitations around it, that was when they actually started to move and grow and become something I could actually get the benefit from and actually share the benefit from. So even though you can look at Kronos or Saturn as the god of death or the god of limitation and time and money and agriculture, you also see that it's because of Saturn and the influence of Saturn that we keep ourselves from going absolutely bonkers. Too much Zeus and not enough Saturn and you'll go nuts, you'll explode. So I urge you to look at things like the god of death and all that sort of stuff with a new perspective, because none of the gods are evil. In fact, all of them have shown their positive and their negative traits. They're not like Catholic or Judaic gods and deities where it's like God's good and the devil's bad and that's that. With the gods, they were much more human. They showed their human side. They showed how complex they were. And so by learning or listening to or reading the stories of the gods from all over the world, you will see these connections and these patterns, and you will learn the energy and the nature of all the planets. When you take that again and you split them up, you will see that you have Saturn responsible for the root chakra, Zeus responsible for the sacral chakra, Mars responsible for the solar plexus chakra, Venus responsible for the heart chakra, Mercury responsible for the throat chakra, the moon responsible for the third eye, and the sun responsible for the crown. So all these systems start to link together more and more. You keep finding new systems and you ponder them for a little while and you can see how they fit, see how they fit, see how they fit. This is a very important aspect of alchemy, especially when you start working with alchemical herbalism. When you start trying to make medicines with alchemical constructs, with alchemical methods, with alchemical beliefs and philosophies, knowing these patterns is essential, because what you'll realize is that a sunflower is ruled by the sun and it actually interacts with your heart. Chili is ruled by Mars and it works with the blood. All Mars-ruled plants work on the blood. All solar and sun-ruled plants work on the heart. And this goes on throughout with all the different types of plants that we have out there. So as you're learning how to work with plants, it's very important that you understand what they do and how they fit together. It's what far too many herbalists these days don't know, and it's why many of these treatments aren't working for people. So if you've tried natural medicines before and if it didn't bring you to the ultimate success and achievement that you were looking for, it's quite likely because even though you had an inflammation problem, maybe your inflammation problem was caused by being too cold and too dry in your body. And somebody gave you turmeric because it's an anti-inflammatory, but it's also a cold and dry herb. When you take turmeric, it makes you colder and drier. And that's the same for other Saturnian herbs. Turmeric is ruled by Saturn, as is aloe vera, and they're cooling and drying. So if you take these herbs and you don't know about these different systems, you may be taking the anti-inflammatory and that's great. But guess what? When the inflammation returns because the turmeric is worn off, you've made the problem that caused the inflammation 10 times worse than when you started. So this is how, as above, so below, as below, so above. The plants reflect the planets. The planets reflect the gods, and the gods are a piece of us. So I know it's a lot to take in, but I hope what I've described to you today has been simple enough to get the gist of, because I just want you to get the base concept now. In the future, I'm going to be doing lots of videos doing deep profiles on each of the gods, each of the planets, and how they relate to plants, the actual plants that are ruled by those gods, so you can start interacting with them. And this is a way that it really makes things a lot more magical, because what it does is it gives a personality to the planets. It gives a personality to the plants, and they stop being objects and they start becoming people. Not human people, magical spiritual beings that you can connect with. This really is one of my favorite parts to learning about alchemy, because it infuses magic in everything. When I go out and I'm climbing the fig tree like I was yesterday, picking all these beautiful figs, I've been waiting all year for the next fig season to come around. I saw the little figs starting to form. They were way too green and way too hard, and I was patient and I was waiting. And then in the last couple of weeks, the first figs of the season, which are my favorite ones, they're usually bigger and juicier, have started to arrive. And because I know that figs are ruled by Jupiter, there's this powerful orange creative energy behind them, and you pull these figs off the tree and you break them open, and they're just like amazingly delicious. They're like already jam, partly in a way. It's absolutely insane how good they are. But I talk to the tree and I talk to the fruit, and I know that might seem crazy, but it makes the experience so much more powerful. It makes the figs that much more delicious. It makes the whole experience that much more in depth and all-encompassing. This is what so many people have lost. This is what so many people are going without, and they don't even realize it. Most people will go to the shop and they'll buy a tomato because it's a tomato, and they'll eat the tomato and then it'll be gone. They'll go and they'll just consume and just consume, and people wonder why they're not fulfilled. Well, I can tell you, when you go through a whole yearly process with a fig tree, when you go through a whole yearly process with the things that grow in your garden or the things that only grow at certain climates, certain times, when you see the result of a gardener that has poured love into their garden to make sure that their plants had the most food and the most water and the most love and the most nourishment, and you can taste it, you can taste the difference, it's a lot more easier to feel excited and stimulated by life. Because it's not so boring anymore. It's not just simply, oh, I'm hungry, so I eat. Good healthy food's boring, so I want to eat something that tastes good. And then so you eat something that tastes good, but that makes you feel like crap because it's unhealthy. And then you eat more of it, and then you eat more of it, and then you eat more of it. Next thing you know, you're chronically depressed and you're medicating yourself with more and more comfort foods, comfort habits, and you get lost in it and you get stuck in it. But that's where nature comes back, and if you're interested, you can re-engage with nature, and I strongly suggest that you do, because when you re-engage with nature and find a fun, interesting relationship with nature again, it never ends. When you watch a TV show or play a video game or read a book, there's only so much you can get from it. But interacting with nature or doing a creative practice, they're infinite and they never stop. If you've got a passion that you want to keep working on every day that involves you creating or coming up with stuff, it has to be where you are inventing or progressing the information that's available on a subject. If you've got one of those things, your whole life's set. Your whole life's sorted. And don't worry if you don't, because I also have a video that I'm just about to release called Finding Your Inner Fire, Finding Your Inner Purpose. And that will show you that everyone can do this. It's simply a choice. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. It's really one of my favorite areas of alchemy and one of the things that really brings the magic alive. So to make sure that you stay informed with all the stuff coming out from the Ether Lab about the plants and the planets and the gods and alchemy and spagyrics, herbal medicines, and all sorts of other different things, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon, and also make sure you check us out on Instagram and Facebook for all the latest content that we're releasing through that. If you're near Melbourne, Australia, check out the meetup group for the upcoming workshops, and for everybody else, those workshops will soon be available as e-courses. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you soon. Au revoir.